Hey everyone, Alex McCarthy from Inside Indiana again. This is Inside Indiana Overtime again, not from Assembly Hall with the Beatles, from my home in Michigan, and talking about Indiana's 73 to 56 loss to Michigan State, where it was close for a long time, and then Michigan State kind of goes on a run near the end of the first half, combines it with a run to start the second half, and just kind of puts Indiana in the rearview mirror. I mean, Indiana got as close, I think, as 8 in the second half, but just didn't have the horses to keep up with Michigan State, which is, when healthy, legitimately one of the two or three best teams in the country. Gary Harris, who has been a little bit up and down this year, he's been hurt quite a bit during his first 2 years, really. But he had probably his best game of the year, career high 26 points, hits 5 3-pointers. It's actually the second time he's done that against IU. So he kind of dominated the first half, and then Keith Appling, who didn't score in the first half and didn't really even look that great in the first half, comes on and scores 14 in the second half. So the guards really killed Indiana today, and that's really what Michigan State throws at you. One day you're going to get beat by Gary Harris and Keith Appling, and another day you're going to get beat by Brandon Dawson and Adrian Payne, and then maybe another day Denzel Valentine. I mean, they just throw so much at you that it's just hard to really shut off Michigan State. I mean, if you shut down Payne and Dawson, you still have to worry about the perimeter guys. If you shut down the perimeter, you still have to worry about your interior defense. So we knew it was going to be a tough test for Indiana, but Indiana really wasn't very close, especially in the last 10 minutes or so. They just couldn't impose their pace whatsoever. I mean, Will Sheehy talked about that a little bit after the game, that they just couldn't move the ball fast enough. They couldn't control the ball, I guess, at a fast enough pace to really speed up Michigan State and get some mistakes from them and get in transition and score. So Indiana loses today. I mean, it's their second straight loss. It's the first time they've done that this year. It's the first time they've done that in 2 years, actually. Lose 2 games in a row. 15 or 16 times in a row they had rebounded off a loss and won. And this was the first time in a couple years that they've done that they've lost 2 in a row. They're 0-2 to start Big Ten play for the first time since the 2010-2011 season. So not in a great position. I mean, there were 2 tough games. I mean, it was at Illinois and then against Michigan State, which is a team that, even at Assembly Hall, even if the students had been there, still, I mean, I don't really see them winning this game, even though, Ken Pom thought that, Michigan State was like a 2-point favorite or something like that. But this was a game that not necessarily was unwinnable going in, but it was a game that Indiana had to play just about perfectly. They had to be firing on all cylinders. They had to shoot like they did against Illinois from the perimeter, and then they just weren't able to. Yogi Ferrell had a big first half. He scored, I think, 10 points in the first half, and then was limited to just 7 in the second half, and I think just 1 field goal. Noah Vonleh, again, kind of disappeared in the second half. I don't think he had a shot attempt after halftime. He had 5 points and 7 rebounds at halftime. He finishes with 5 points and 9 rebounds for the game. Again, foul trouble was kind of an issue for him. But again, he talked about after the game, Michigan State was just kind of throwing some different things at Vonleh, and like you do with any kind of star player, is the best defense really is just preventing them from getting the ball, and that's what Michigan State was able to do quite a bit of in the second half. And then, Sheehy also mentioned that, and they've said this before, Crean said this before, a couple guys have said this before, that Vonleh just needs to work a little bit harder to get open, and his teammates need to work a little bit harder to get him the ball and work him open. I mean, it's kind of the same thing we heard about Cody Zeller for a couple years, was just that you got to be able to work your offense through him, and if you can't, you're going to kind of lack an identity a little bit, and Indiana did today. I mean, there were tons of times where there just wasn't really an offense, and they had to settle for a contested jump shot, or or there was a turnover or something like that. And so again, we're kind of seeing Indiana's offense stagnate when they're not able to get out and run. And Michigan State all game was able to just clamp down. I think it was the second or third possession of the game where Indiana had like a 3-on-2 or something and tried to push it, but just couldn't exactly find the gas and had to pull it back and ended up shooting an air ball. So that was kind of the story of Indiana's night, was just not being able to really implement their pace or to really implement anything. They weren't really able to control much at all of this game. and Michigan State simply had its way with Indiana. I mean, they just have more experienced players, better players in some instances, and they showed it tonight. Indiana again actually broke its streak of 20 turnover games. I guess that's a silver lining of sorts. Indiana only turned it over 15 times. 12 of those were live ball turnovers, which means there wasn't a stoppage in play. It's not like they threw it out of bounds or traveled or something. There was like Michigan State had 12 steals, and Tom Crean has talked about that all year about trying to limit those kind of live ball turnovers where they can turn into points, that quickly with a transition dunk or a transition three or something like that. And Michigan State made them pay all night. They scored 22 points off turnovers. They dominated Indiana in the paint, scored 30 compared to 16. They out-rebounded Indiana. That's the first time this year that's happened. They out-rebounded them by 2, which isn't that much. But for a team whose rebound margin was plus 13 or something like that coming into the game, it was. I mean, that's a sign that Michigan State just manhandled them all game really. Indiana just struggled to shoot quite a bit. I mean, you just run down the stat sheet and not a very pretty showing from Indiana. Outside of, Farrell had 17. Woolsey, he had a big second half. He scored 11 of his 13 points after halftime. He was 4 for 4 from the field, 3 for 3 from behind the arc. And he and Stan Robinson actually showed quite a bit of rapport with each other in the second half. Robinson was, Indiana went more than 6 minutes without a field goal, and Robinson came in and he's shown what a great slasher he can be, and how he just goes to the rim with a vengeance kind of. And he back-to-back possessions, he drove inside just kind of with reckless abandon, with aggression, and just went in there and scored back-to-back buckets. And then he hit a 3, and Indiana was on that little 7-0 run. The deficit was cut to 8, and then they just weren't able to maintain anything for a long time because that offense really, when they're not running, they weren't really able to do that much, especially with Yogi Ferrell not on the court. As good as Stan Robinson was, without Ferrell on the court, it gets a little disorganized, it gets a little unfocused and slow, really, on the offensive end. But yeah, Stan Robinson had a great night. He was 5 for 9, 11 points, a couple assists, including a really nice no-look pass to Sheehy for a dunk. So they're positively, like any game, there's some positives you can take out of this. But for the most part, it was just a significantly better Michigan State team came to Assembly Hall and beat a team they should have beaten. And so, like I said, it's not like Indiana was really, it's not like Indiana fans were really, really expecting this to be a win, but it maybe wasn't quite as graceful of a loss as people might have expected. So it was almost a 20-point loss, which Indiana hasn't had in a long time. And it's just kind of a statement on where the team is. Maybe they're a long ways away. Maybe they're even a year away from being a tournament team. But we're going to find out. And like I said, Indiana kind of started off with a couple tough opponents to start Big Ten, or a couple tough situations, in probably a tournament-bound or tournament potential Illinois team, and then a national title contender in Michigan State. But they traveled to Penn State a week from today, a week from Saturday, to see if they can beat Penn State. Michigan State had its way with Penn State earlier this week, and so maybe Indiana can have similar luck. If not, then maybe that's a sign for Indiana fans to kind of start panicking because a loss, it's just one loss today. Whether it was by 5 points or by 20, it's just a loss. But if you lose to Penn State, things can really get ugly pretty fast in Big Ten play. So we're going to find out, what happens over at Happy Valley and at University Park, Pennsylvania. But until then, I'm Alex McCarthy with Inside Indiana, and thank you very much for watching Inside Indiana Overtime.